I try to get people to describe things as emotionally and viscerally as possible. I want it to feel like when you find out that your grandmother passed away, you're like, okay, those are interesting things that aren't musical, but I can write music that kind of feels that way.
Chuck, what's the one thing no film should do without?
A musical score, unless you're making No Country for Old Men.
You are absolutely right. When even silent films can acknowledge the importance of sound and music.
Maybe it's time for indie filmmakers to get on the same page.
Welcome to Indie Film Podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I am Chuck. This week we're chatting with local musician, Boise musician, film composer, and completely unbiased individual, Jesse Blake Rundle.
A film score is pretty important.
Agreed. And if our listeners take away absolutely nothing else from this episode, I hope they at least walk away with that.
So, Jesse, why don't we start with comparing stock music with a original film score? What is it that you offer that people can't find on their Adobe stock music account?
I'd say quite a bit. I think if your film has an emotional arc, the chance of stock music really fitting that and adding to it is pretty slim. It might kind of like fill some space or help with like a slow pacing moment, maybe move it a little bit forward. But if you want music that's going to either accentuate the emotions that are there, or you want it to like draw out a different emotion that maybe isn't as present in the screen, then you need someone to write music. That's kind of just how it works.
And I think that there's kind of this confusion sometimes when people do drop, I'll call it temp tracks into their film. As soon as you add some music to a scene, it almost always instantly makes it feel better.
Yeah.
Even if you're looking in your stock music library, whatever, intense violins or scary person around the corner. You throw that in on top of the video and it's like, oh my gosh, this made it so much better.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important that people realize it's okay not to stop there.
Right.
That's not what you're aiming for at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Typically.
And we've talked before on this podcast about the importance of using quality music, right? So local musicians obviously have needle drop tracks or tracks that they've recorded for their albums that a lot of times they will be willing to offer in exchange for like video creation services. That's going to sound a lot better than stock stuff. But you also compose for film. And do you want to kind of just talk about what indie filmmakers should consider when they are asking a musician to score their film or a composer to score for their film?
Yeah, trying to think of where to start there. One is style. I think I produce music for a living, mostly more like songwriter, indie rock kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And in producing music, working with people, what you find is communicating about music in English is pretty tough. So when working with a filmmaker or working with a musician of any kind, I'm trying to figure out what they want.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll say something like, oh, I want it to be really rhythmic and driving. And I show examples of things that are really rhythmic and driving. They're like, but I didn't really want drums. That's the second thing. Like, oh,
well, that's
okay.
pretty hard to do without drums.
Like, so what do you mean? And like, well, and then they show another example and I try to recreate that example. And it's really difficult. Like I'm not making fun of filmmakers. I think it's difficult for everyone to communicate the feeling that they're trying to go for.
Yeah.
And it's my job as the composer to kind of figure out what language someone uses to describe music, and translate that into actual new music. So,
do you have an example, a little bit more specific, of a time that you've had success with a director or with a filmmaker, and what that looked like?
Yeah,
where the process started and then where it ended up. Yeah,
I had a really specific one where I was composing the final cue for a film, and the director asked for. He said, I want a lullaby that could be played on repeat without ever annoying someone. I was like, okay. And I was like, what, can you give an example? And he like mentioned a couple like classic lullabies that we all learned.
Brahms lullaby or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like things like, some of the best pieces of music ever composed.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's a good challenge.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, here's my start. I got a world-class lullaby. And I wrote a lullaby, and I was like, I'm actually pretty proud of this. It's like got this kind of sing-songiness to it. It's a little bit hopeful, and it has it has the cyclical nature, so it can kind of come back onto itself and start again without feeling like you just hit stop, start. And so I did that, and then the director was like, "Well, I like it, but it's far too hopeful for me." I was like, "Huh? Well, you asked for a lullaby." So
He wanted those really popular sad lullabies
Yeah.
where, you know, maybe the kid's not going to wake up. You know,
Right.
that's sad. Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is like, okay, well, this is not the right approach. So what I was like, okay, well, how do we add this? How do we add some kind of mystery to this, or sadness, or not necessarily sadness, but something that just feels a little off? So I ended up kind of recomposing the lullaby melody in a 5/4 time signature, which no one who listens to it should know that, but it feels like an unexpected, like the rhythm returns on itself in an unexpected time where you're not really expecting the melody to start over again, and then it does. So it kind of, one, feels a little unfinished, and two, feels like a surprise. And that's what we end up going with. I don't think the director even knows that's what I did, but that is what I did.
Nice.
But the director was happier.
Oh, yeah. It was
Okay.
great. Yeah.
So if something needs to be a little bit more melancholy, we just go to 5/4.
Go to 5/4, do something a little bit weird. Yeah.
I like it.
What kind of language do you prefer directors communicate to you, like their aspirations for film scores?
Yeah, I mean, I try to get people to describe things as emotionally and viscerally as possible. So
Okay.
some people are like, oh, I want it to sound blue. And a lot of producers or composers would complain about that, which is real, but if that's how a director thinks of it, like, I want this to feel blue. I want it to feel like the trees blowing in the wind. I want it to feel like when you find out that your grandmother passed away. You're like, okay, those are interesting things that aren't musical, but I can start to sort of think about how you feel about this, and then I can write music that kind of feels that way. So that, I think, using emotional language and really like kind of poemy language is helpful.
Okay.
And then making a track list of reference tracks, not temp music, but just like music that's inspiring.
Okay.
Because also everyone has taste that goes beyond maybe what the individual cues are going to be, but everyone has taste for what kind of music they like. And that's a really difficult thing to communicate without just like making a playlist. So, because everyone says they listen to everything, and it's just not true.
Yeah.
Everyone listens to a lot of things, but everyone has a very distinctive taste, and figuring out what someone's taste is pretty important early stage for me. Otherwise, I'm going to make things that might be good, might fit, but aren't to the taste of the director, so they're not going to work.
So what you're saying is old school Facebook, where you could have like your music playlist on your page, was
Yeah.
actually very helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Because you could just stalk these people and figure out what music they like.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
that helps a lot.
Or wait, was that old school Facebook or was that
MySpace,
MySpace?
yeah.
That was MySpace.
MySpace, yeah.
There we go. That's the one. Thank you.
That was old school Facebook.
True, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
What
Okay.
were Tom's top tracks? Does anyone remember?
Oh, I'm sure it was whoever was paying him the most to be
Yeah.
on there that day.
That's
I don't
not
know.
true. Yeah.
So then, as far as filmmakers being prepared with what to hand off to you, definitely not speaking from my own personal experience here at all. Of course not.
Of course.
But if a filmmaker is going to be speaking to a composer, not necessarily just a band or a musician or a friend they know who had a guitar in high school,
Yeah.
but an actual composer, should they expect to just hand off the movie and say, here you go, by the way, here's my Spotify like favorite playlist, that's enough for you? Or should they be prepared to break it down scene by scene and overall goals for the music? Like, what are you hoping to get from a filmmaker other than just the ways they talk about the film?
Yeah. I'm expecting to get a lot. I think, yeah, the emotional character, like a feeling of like what the goal of this movie is, because especially if you've been working with temp music and you strip that back and you just play the film, it's pretty hard for the composer to know where it's supposed to go. So getting a playlist of things, getting a sense of what emotions are looking to be drawn out or accentuated, and getting some kind of rough cue list. Like, are there hit are there hit points that want to be accented by music, or is there a tonal shift that happens at minute 4 where you're trying to go, you like maybe visually it doesn't really change much, but the director knows that we need a tonal shift that's happening like underneath the character arc. Those kind of things are super important. So what I've done, it usually works best to just get in the room together, because unless someone's super experienced, they're not going to know how to communicate those things. And I'm not going to know how to ask the right questions either. So we just like sit down, watch it, and call out cue points. We're like, okay, music's going to start here. Music's going to stop here probably. Or like music in this moment is probably going to be pulled from music that happened earlier in the film because it's emotionally similar, or we're trying to connect those two parts of the narrative together.
Okay.
So just sitting down and mapping out a cue list is super important as kind of a stage 1. And then the stage 2 that I've basically done with everyone I've worked with is actually sitting down and composing with the director in the room.
Oh.
So just like pulling up some piano pads or string pads or kind of whatever textures we're working with and playing the film and just kind of improvising on top of it and getting their reaction. That's worked really well too.
That sounds so intimidating.
For
Like
who?
as somebody,
For me?
yeah, like I'm just imagining if there's somebody else near me and I'm trying to type on a computer, then all of a sudden I can't spell anything or don't know how to hit backspace properly. So I just imagine trying to take out a whole instrument and just go and improvise on the that sounds very intimidating.
You're right. It is intimidating a little bit, especially when someone's hired you and is paying you and you're like, I'm going to make some garbage in front of you. Sorry. But that has to be part of the process. I think if you're an artist and you don't know that making garbage is part of the process, then what are you doing?
That's true,
yeah.
right?
Okay.
Draft 1 is going to be draft 1. There's nothing you can do to get to draft 3.
Right. There's no other way.
You have to go through drafts 1 and 2 to
That's fair.
Yeah.
find your way there.
I do wonder though if like John Williams feels that way every time he sits down with Spielberg, Like, was
I would
that
imagine there would
the
be
tone in the
a
room?
rapport there
Yeah.
that they probably have if they've worked together. I would guess, music
Yeah.
like composers working with the same director over and over again. I would imagine it just continues to get easier and
Yeah.
or more efficient.
Yeah.
So
I guess that's fair. I guess that's almost any crew member too, right? Like, or even like in your band, you're probably not rotating through a bunch of different drummers every single week.
Right.
Because once you find somebody that gets it and flows with you, you probably want to keep them around.
Yeah, you want to keep them around. That's true.
Okay.
And I guess, maybe that's a good point. I think if I was working with someone new, my first step wouldn't be to improvise in front of them because I want to prove my worth a little bit first.
Let me draft something for you while you're not watching me.
Yes. Yeah. And then once we have that, then maybe there's a session together where you're like, okay, how do we adjust this? And because for me, it's just so important to get their reaction in real time. Where they're like, okay, I'm maybe playing this little guitar riff, and they're like, oh, but that's too moody, or maybe that's too busy, and then I can adjust immediately instead of it. Just saves me so much time compared to like trying to compose 7 different versions of the same cue and then get notes on each one. You're like, oh, I like this part of this one and that part of that one and that part of that one, and then try to mishmash that together. It's easier to do it in real time.
No, that makes sense. I can see that being substantially faster.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay.
question I have for you as far as we've been talking about composing, and you've also had your music featured. I know at least in some of the lower gentry stuff that I've
Yeah.
worked on, your music featured from various EPs that you've recorded, that you've spent time mastering, those types of things. If you're approached by a filmmaker that wants music, like what flexibility do you have as far as them requesting just a needle drop of one of your songs, like maybe as far as cost or trade is concerned versus doing a composition? And what do you value as an independent musician in that scenario?
Okay.
If that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
because you're basically fighting the same battle that we filmmakers are fighting, just on the musical end, where you're trying to get, I would imagine, trying to get exposure.
Yeah.
Trying to get more people to follow you so that you can sell more albums down the line. So how do you weight that?
Can I also throw in one quick interjection? That's another question.
Mm-hmm.
Needle drop versus composition. Just for anybody,
Oh yeah.
until I started hearing needle drop very consistently, I had no idea what that meant. So what is that? What is a needle drop in a film?
Are you asking me?
Either
for
one
it.
of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So needle drop is when I'm using that term, it's like just taking a track that exists that a musician has already recorded and then using it in your film, a la Martin Scorsese does that a lot,
Yeah.
where he's just playing a song that everybody recognizes. I think A Knight's Tale is the best example with Heath Ledger, where they just use
Forgot that existed.
yeah,
Wow.
it was a film. It was like a night battle film, but that they used a whole bunch of rock songs throughout the entire thing. So that
Right.
would be an example of a needle drop versus what John Williams does or what Danny Elfman does, which is to write original music specifically for the film. That's a composition.
And also not a musical where it's the story is being carried specifically through the music. This is music that is in, so it's not like a Baz Luhrmann doing
No.
Great Gatsby kind of, or I guess it's more Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby, less Moulin Rouge.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
I was like Jaws. Dun, 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 that's a composer.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Sorry. So now that that's clarified, yes, please continue, Jesse. Thank
I
you.
mean, and for me as a independent musician, a needle drop's great because I don't have to do anything.
You're already there.
And I might get exposure. If something does well, then I have music out there. Of course, if you have a bigger name, then you're thinking about sync licensing and stuff. But that's not. I mean, most of the people I'm working with are in this arts community we have around here, and I'm not looking to make a buck off of them. I'm looking to be a part of the community and maybe get some work for trade.
Yeah.
Build
Which a lot of
goodwill.
us outside of New York, LA, London, large cities throughout the world, we're kind of in a different boat than the musicians and artists in those larger areas.
Right.
I feel like.
Yeah, and no one's like trying to take advantage of you here.
No.
Which if I was living in New York and someone was like, "Hey, can I use your song for free for exposure?" I would feel like, "Oh, this person's probably trying to take advantage of me." But here it's like, no, it's just we're all just trying to make art, and if someone ever gets ahead and makes a buck, then cool, that'd be great to be a part of that. But yeah, needle drop is great. And composing takes a ton of time and effort and is hard. So I rarely do that for free. I've done some of that for free to basically build up my own skill set there, because I've been really curious about composing for film for a long time. So I've done some work for free or for cheap to build up the skills and to get a little bit of a resume, build up the IMDb credits. And I'm at a point now where it's like I just don't have enough time to write a lot of free music.
Yeah.
So I can't really do that anymore. Even if I want to, it just doesn't really make sense for me financially. I'll just, it's like either get paid or don't eat. So
Yeah.
right, did I
that
say
sounds
that right?
reasonable. Yeah, that's a completely reasonable ask. Of course. That's, how else are you going to be a starving artist if you're not starving?
Right.
So if we have some musicians out there listening to this podcast, what would you recommend they do because you just mentioned that to move into composing, you did some work on the cheap or for free. What do you recommend musicians consider if they're trying to make that leap from I'm going to release tracks and albums to I want to compose for some of the filmmakers in my area?
Yeah, I think get involved in the film scene and start trying to find people you want to collaborate with and offer them free work. I think that's just how this industry works. So, some people don't like that idea of working for free, of giving away your services for free, but I think that's how the thing works. And like I said, it's not like someone's trying to take advantage of you, or someone's like going out and making a short film for a local film festival and is going to make money off of it. They're not making money. No one's making money. So if you want to be a part of that scene, you gotta be a part of the scene, and it should be fun. So if you're not in it for the fun of it, then also it's like, what are you doing?
I like that. Yeah, if you're not having fun, then just don't do it.
Yeah.
And that part of that is making sure you're surrounding yourself with the people that you want to spend time with and work
Right.
with and learn these things at the same time.
Yeah, so if you find a filmmaker that maybe seems just horrible to work with, and you're like, absolutely not. So that's not somebody you have to work with for free then.
No.
Yeah, you're allowed to say no.
Yeah, just don't do it.
Okay.
So what entices you, Jesse, as far as being flexible on payment? Just you directly, which may not be the same reasons for somebody else. Like, is there a certain type of project that gets your attention? Is there a certain type of trade that you look at as far as working with filmmakers? Because we've mentioned on this podcast before, we actually met because we were doing a live video series, which we sent you those assets as soon as live music video series, and we sent those assets to you as soon as we were done, and that helped us build a relationship. And made the film that my brother and sister-in-law and I made infinitely better. Like, I think it took it from like a CB to like A+, as soon as your score was put in there.
Oh, thanks.
So what are those things that you consider?
Yeah. I mean, one, do I think it's good art? Like, do I want to be a part of it? Do I want my name associated with it? That's the main thing.
Okay.
And then, is the team fun to work with is the other one. I think those two. And then, I mean, we were just talking about a potential musical. It's also just like, how much time do I have?
Right on.
Do I have enough? Am I overcommitting myself? Because that's the other thing too. Is like, if I'm going to do work for a friend that's supposed to be fun, like, I want to do good work. I don't want to do bad work. I could just skate by and do some mediocre work that basically sounds like temp music, or sounds like your stock music. But that's not interesting to me. If I'm going to do it, I want it to be something I'm proud of and can be part of my own resume. So, it's just like, do I have the time? Does it seem fun? And is it going to be an interesting piece of art that is like says something?
So the number one way to collaborate with Jesse Blake Rundle, which I imagine is the same for a lot of musicians out there, is to be creating art that actually pulls at your heartstrings.
Yeah.
And then from there.
I mean, personally, I feel like the craft services table also plays a role. Back to the starving artist concept.
Yeah, there was that little trailer we shot, and they had the licorice. The licorice was really good.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah. So licorice, that's important. So
it was like
first,
fancy. It was like Australian licorice or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
That's good stuff.
Okay, you all know.
I like where it's the black licorice, but it's also salted sometimes too. Have you had that one?
I haven't. It was just the red one.
No,
It
the
was so chewy.
black licorice with the salt on it is just kill. It's the same brand that you're
same
talking
brand,
about.
okay.
Yeah.
So Australian listeners out there, you know how to pull at our heartstrings to send us licorice. We'll be more than happy to pay the tariffs as soon as it comes in the mail.
Surprisingly, no one's ever given me ice cream at craft services, but that would also work.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Ice cream is hard to do on craft services, but I was on one set where they had hired an ice cream truck to come by after, like, between the mid-afternoon break time when they knew they had a big setup change, so that everyone was just kind of sitting around for a little
Amazing,
while.
yeah.
And they just had the ice cream truck come by, and it definitely boosted morale for that one.
I think that would work.
Yeah.
Or just, there's like those bars that you'd buy in like middle school.
The
where there's, like,
sandwiches?
the sandwiches, but like the ones with like the strawberry coating on them. Do you remember those?
Strawberry coating on
Is
the
that
ice
just a
cream.
Kansas thing?
That might just be a Kansas thing.
Okay.
I don't remember
they were
that
very
one.
good. I would do work for free for that.
So this is sort of like, what would you do for a Klondike bar? Now we know.
You do.
There we go.
I would
Okay.
write original score.
I hope all musicians would be willing to consider that as well. It'd be nice.
Maybe.
So can you paint us a picture just to kind of let all the indie filmmakers know out there that it feels, when you tell me about what you do, it feels like we're kind of in a similar situation, right? Where, indie filmmakers, if we are doing video and film full time, a lot of times it isn't our thing. Mm-hmm. We're helping people out on other projects. We're doing commercial work, to help pay the bills. Can you tell us, you do compositions, you've released several albums of your own, but then you also have a studio where you're recording people here in the Boise area, helping them mix tracks. You do the tracking, you also do the mixing, all that stuff. Can you kind of just paint a picture of what your average day or week looks like so everybody knows,
I a day or a week in the life of a composer slash musician slash business owner, an entrepreneur?
Right. It's pretty crazy. It's every day is so different. I'd say I usually have about 10-ish projects going in the studio at any given time, all different kind of time scales. But so I have lots of artists coming in to record or to review mixes or I have like introductions for newer clients that are coming in to kind of figure out what their goals are. So I got a lot of artists coming in the studio. And then when they're not in there, then I'm often mixing and mastering. And then I have my own music, so there's a lot of just promo work for that. It's like making video content. I do a lot of video content to get the word out there about my own music and find the audience. And kind of always working on recording or prepping another release. Like I have a single coming out in a few days, so there's all that kind of work for that. And then like applying for residencies and grants and trying to get funding and just keep collaborating. So, the number of projects in my head at any given time is way too many. And I try to pretty much every morning I just sit down and I write like, what am I going to think about today? And I write about 15 things usually, and I usually work on 2. So
Nice.
that's how it goes. Yeah.
I like that. I like that you give yourself a whole list of options.
Yeah.
Probably just because those are all the things weighing on your brain in some form or another.
Yeah.
But that's
Right.
cool.
Dump them out and then it's like, okay, well, I can only really do 1 or 2 of those today.
The myth of, no, you'll totally be productive for 8 solid, uninterrupted hours today.
Impossible. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's how humans work.
That sounds really similar, though, to what we do.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, having to work with post-production, editing, audio mixing, same type of thing. And then also trying to find time for our own projects, which I do want to hit on for you, Jesse, because you had mentioned that you have a single coming out by the time this episode airs. That'll be out. How should people follow you? And I also want to mention, too, so you don't have to say it yourself, I feel like your vertical videos that you make on TikTok and Instagram are really, really well done.
Oh, thank
They're
you.
also very entertaining and very interesting. And yes, they're not all clips of just music. For better or for worse, it's fine. I would love to see even more of. No, I'm kidding. I'm not telling you to do more work. No, they're really, really great. But it's also really fun just to get to see a little bit of a day in the life of, and you're really good at sharing that. And so on social media, you are a very fun follow.
It's
thanks.
a good outline for people that are in the art scene to see how you do it, so we don't feel like we're constantly trying to promote ourselves.
Yeah,
in a way
right.
that feels unnatural. But anyway, how can people find you?
Yeah, so Jesse Blake Rundle, if you search that on kind of anything, I'll show up. Spotify and Apple is where all the music is. And then on Instagram and TikTok, I'm pretty active on both of those. And like you said, everyone complains about social media for good reason. And I've just worked really hard to try to find a way to fit it into my life in a way that makes me not hate it and hate myself.
Nice.
Good.
And so I have some really strict rules about what I will and won't do, or what I will and won't feel. It's like, if I feel bad about doing this, I'm not doing this anymore. So,
you mean you set boundaries even for social media?
yes, very strict boundaries.
Very impressive.
It's like, the way I think of it too is like, if you're walking into a casino, it doesn't matter if you have a gambling problem or not. You can't like get from one side of the casino to the other without getting like trapped by the slot machines or by something.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel like social media is. It's like, it doesn't matter if you care about affirmation or care about the likes and the clicks. The game is rigged to make you feel bad. So you got to have really strict boundaries to make it across the casino floor without dying.
Wasn't that the study that Meta released way back in the day, or maybe it was just Instagram before Facebook bought it, where it was that it was so psychologically damaging to people that they were restricting people and like, no, from now on, if you're under 13, you can't have an account. That's doing some very serious damage to the children of this nation.
Yeah, it's bad. So
If you feel the urge to grab your phone, have a cigarette instead.
it's much better. Anyway, I'm on the social stuff, and
Cool.
I got a single coming out called Eyes in a couple days. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
We'll put a link to that in the description here
Yeah.
as well. And you'll be playing, we're going to be at Treefort/Pod Fort, which is an annual giant music/art festival here in Boise.
Yeah.
And you'll be playing at that for anyone who's in the area.
Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. at the band shell. So
Okay,
Which is open to the public, so anybody can just go attend
Yeah.
that if you're in the Boise area. That's the Julia Davis band shell, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
And that's the last weekend in March.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and
Which
we'll
will
be
be
we'll be
awesome.
there doing a live podcast as well, and Dive will be screening at that festival.
It will.
Victoria's Dive.
So cool.
Excellent.
Be
Shall
fun.
we move on to the Filmmaker of the Week?
I think we should. So this week we have Chris or Christopher Maes, the writer, director, and producer at Trujillo Creek Pictures.
He's a UCLA film school graduate who initially worked as a professional screenwriter. He fell in love, got married, had kids, left Los Angeles for the East Coast, worked in post-production for various doc TV series, and didn't direct for 20 years before getting hit by the bug when COVID shut down everything.
Bit by the directing bug, not the COVID bug.
Yes, the directing bug. Well, might have been both. He didn't specify there. So he did make it the mission to master indie filmmaking for feature films and has since written and directed 2 indie features. And his lesson, I like this, is to be patient. It's not a race.
I do like that because you see and hear about a lot of success stories of people either right out of film school or graduating high school or still in high school, and they're winning all these big competitions and making waves and stuff. And it's like, hey, it doesn't matter how old you are when you go into filmmaking. Your next big, amazing thing could still be ahead of you at any age. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like as I've gotten older, I used to feel more behind on things.
Yeah.
And now I don't feel behind, even though I'm over 40 and I should be feeling very behind. But
I should not feel this good about myself.
It's gonna move forward at the rate it's gonna move. He has a tip for us. He was talking about in-camera effects on the message that he sent us, and he had a cool situation where he shot an exterior scene of a character climbing vertically up the side of a space station, and so he just shot the whole thing horizontally and then tilted the camera 45 degrees so that he could fix it all in post. So it didn't actually, nobody had to climb anything.
Oh, that's pretty impressive.
Just walk across the floor. So don't forget about those in-camera effects because
there's a lot you can do without requiring special editing afterwards. And yes, you can do it in the edit afterward, but it's kind of fun to see the differences in some of the practical effects.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your story with us. And we'll put a link to some of his work in the description.
Specifically his film Airshift.
Oh, yes.
The trailer for that is on YouTube, so we'll be linking to that.
And if you would like to submit to be the Filmmaker of the Week, go to indiefilmpodcast.com/submit, and then you'll find our link to Indie Filmmaker of the Week, and you can even record a voice memo for us if you'd like to have your voice played.
Yeah, and you don't have to listen to us trying to talk about you. You can just talk about you.
Yes.
Please send us your voice memos.
Right on. So anything else anyone wants to add? Or shall we succinctly say farewell?
I think so.
Farewell.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.